What if one of the simplest nutrients on Earth, something sitting in your kitchen right now, has a direct effect on your energy, focus, exercise performance, hydration, nerve signaling, and even brain function? And what if many people who believe they are tired, foggy, weak, or dehydrated are not actually lacking motivation, but lacking proper electrolyte balance? Today, we're talking about salt, and specifically how sodium, and when used correctly, but can optimize both mental and physical performance. Now, this topic is incredibly misunderstood. For years, salt has been treated almost like a universal villain. People hear salt and immediately think high blood pressure, water retention, poor health. But physiology is far more nuanced than that, because sodium is not simply a seasoning. It's an essential electrolyte required for life itself. Without adequate sodium, your nervous system cannot function properly. Muscles cannot contract efficiently. Hydration becomes impaired, blood volume drops, cognitive performance declines, and energy production suffers. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Your brain and nervous system communicate through electrical signaling. That signaling depends heavily on electrolytes, especially sodium, potassium, magnesium, and calcium. Sodium plays a major role in generating action potentials, the electrical impulses neurons use to communicate. In simple terms, your brain literally relies on sodium to transmit information, and your muscles depend on it too. Now, importantly, this does not mean more salt is always better. The real issue is balance, context, and physiology, because sodium needs vary dramatically depending on activity level, sweat loss, climate, diet, hydration habits, stress levels, and metabolic state. For example, people following low carbohydrate or ketogenic diets often excrete more sodium through the kidneys due to lower insulin levels. Athletes lose significant sodium through sweat. People fasting may experience sodium depletion more quickly, and chronic stress alters fluid and electrolyte regulation too. So, a one-size-fits-all approach to salt intake often fails biologically. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your body as an electrical system. Water alone is not enough to keep the system functioning properly. You also need the conductive minerals that allow electricity to flow efficiently. That's what electrolytes do, and sodium is one of the most critical conductors in that system. Today, we're going to break down how sodium affects the brain and nervous system, why hydration is not just about drinking water, the relationship between sodium, cortisol, insulin, and metabolism, how active people can optimize electrolyte intake, and practical science-based protocols for improving focus, energy, endurance, and recovery. Because once you understand the physiology behind salt, you stop viewing it as simply good or bad, and start understanding how it influences nearly every major system in the body. One of the biggest mistakes people make when thinking about hydration is assuming that drinking more water automatically improves performance. But biologically, hydration is not just about water. It's about water balance. And water balance depends heavily on electrolytes, especially sodium. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Water follows electrolytes. Sodium helps regulate where water moves throughout the body. Inside cells, outside cells, in the bloodstream, in muscle tissue, and in the nervous system. This means sodium directly affects blood volume, circulation, nerve transmission, muscle contraction, and cognitive performance. So if someone drinks large amounts of water without sufficient electrolytes, hydration efficiency can actually decline. Symptoms often include fatigue, brain fog, headaches, low energy, poor exercise performance, and difficulty concentrating. Many people misinterpret these symptoms as lack of motivation when the real issue is electrolyte imbalance. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine trying to run an electrical system with water alone, but very little conductive material. The system loses efficiency. That's essentially what happens in the body when electrolytes become diluted. Now, one major reason sodium becomes especially important during exercise is sweat loss. Sweat contains sodium, and some individuals lose significantly more sodium than others genetically. This is why two people can do the exact same workout, but one feels completely depleted afterward, while the other recovers relatively easily. What the research shows is that sodium replacement can improve endurance, blood volume maintenance, and cognitive performance during exercise, particularly in hot environments. And importantly, dehydration affects the brain quickly. Even mild dehydration can impair reaction time, attention, and mood. Now, another extremely important point is the relationship between sodium and carbohydrate intake. Insulin strongly affects kidney sodium retention. When insulin drops during low-carb diets or fasting, sodium excretion increases. This is one reason many people transitioning into keto or intermittent fasting experience fatigue, headaches, weakness, brain fog, and muscle cramps, often called the keto flu. In many cases, this is largely an electrolyte issue. A practical protocol for many people includes increasing sodium intake intentionally through mineral-rich foods, broths, or electrolyte solutions. Now let's talk about stress. Chronic stress changes fluid regulation dramatically. Cortisol and aldosterone influence sodium retention and potassium balance. This is one reason nervous system health and metabolic health are deeply connected. The body is constantly balancing fluids, minerals, hormones, and stress chemistry simultaneously. One highly effective strategy for many active individuals is front-loading hydration earlier in the day. For example, 16 to 32 ounces of water in the morning with electrolytes, especially before exercise, sauna use, fasting, or prolonged cognitive work. Many people notice improvements in alertness, mental clarity, and physical performance almost immediately. If this is helpful so far, consider subscribing. I post content like this every day focused on neuroscience, metabolism, hydration, hormonal health, and science-based tools for optimizing the brain and body naturally. One of the most fascinating and often overlooked roles of sodium is its direct impact on brain performance and cognitive function. Because most people think about salt only in terms of hydration or blood pressure, but sodium is fundamentally a neurological mineral. Your brain depends on it constantly. Every thought, movement, emotion, and reaction inside the nervous system relies on electrical signaling between neurons. And sodium is one of the primary electrolytes responsible for generating those electrical impulses. Without sodium gradients, neurons cannot fire properly. In simple terms, your brain literally uses sodium to communicate. This becomes especially important during periods of stress, sleep deprivation, intense exercise, fasting, or excessive sweating, because all of these increase the likelihood of electrolyte imbalance. And the brain is extremely sensitive to even mild changes in sodium and hydration status. This is why dehydration often causes brain fog, poor concentration, mental fatigue, reduced reaction time, and irritability. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your brain like a high-performance electrical network. Sodium acts partly like the conductive medium, allowing signals to travel efficiently. When electrolyte balance becomes compromised, the system still functions, but with lower efficiency. Now, another extremely important concept is blood volume. Sodium helps maintain plasma volume, the liquid component of blood. This matters because blood carries oxygen and nutrients to the brain. If blood volume drops too low due to dehydration or sodium depletion, cerebral blood flow can decline, and this often leads to fatigue, dizziness, and low focus. Now, another fascinating relationship exists between sodium and adrenal function. The adrenal glands help regulate fluid and electrolyte balance through hormones like aldosterone and cortisol. Under chronic stress, these systems become dysregulated. Many chronically stressed individuals experience altered sodium handling and fluctuating energy levels. This is one reason fatigue is often more complex than simply low energy. Electrolyte balance, stress hormones, sleep quality, and nervous system regulation all interact simultaneously. Now let's talk about fasting. Many people use intermittent fasting for metabolic health and cognitive clarity. But one of the most common reasons people feel terrible while fasting is electrolyte imbalance. When insulin drops during fasting, sodium excretion increases. This can create headaches, low energy, poor concentration, dizziness, and irritability. A practical protocol many people benefit from during fasting includes water plus electrolytes, especially during longer fasting windows or physically active days. Now, another major factor affecting sodium needs is exercise intensity. High-intensity exercise increases sweat loss dramatically, and sweat contains sodium. Some people are genetically salty sweaters. You can often notice this through white salt residue on clothing or skin after exercise. These individuals may require substantially more sodium replacement than average. Another powerful application of sodium involves pre-workout performance. Adequate sodium before exercise can improve blood volume, muscular endurance, circulation, and muscle contraction efficiency. A practical example: water plus electrolytes 30 to 60 minutes before exercise. Especially for endurance training or hot environments, many people notice improved energy, stamina, and cognitive sharpness during training. One of the most misunderstood aspects of sodium is its relationship with blood pressure and cardiovascular health. For decades, many people were told a very simple message: salt is dangerous. But human physiology is far more nuanced than that. Blood pressure regulation is influenced by many interconnected systems simultaneously. Sodium plays a role, but so do insulin, kidney function, stress hormones, inflammation, sleep quality, body fat levels, physical activity, and potassium intake. This is why reducing health down to a single nutrient rarely works biologically. Now, this does not mean excessive sodium intake is harmless for everyone. Certain individuals are genetically salt sensitive and may experience elevated blood pressure with excessive sodium intake. People with kidney disease or uncontrolled hypertension may need careful sodium management. But for many healthy active individuals, the issue is often more about the overall metabolic environment than sodium alone. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine blaming one musician for an orchestra sounding bad. The reality is the entire system matters. Blood pressure works similarly. The nervous system, hormones, blood vessels, inflammation, electrolytes, and body composition all interact together. Now, one of the biggest hidden drivers of hypertension today is insulin resistance. Chronically elevated insulin increases sodium retention through the kidneys and contributes to fluid imbalance and vascular dysfunction. This is why highly processed diets often create problems, not simply because of sodium alone, but because they combine refined carbohydrates, poor quality fats, inflammation, overeating, and metabolic dysfunction. In many cases, sodium gets blamed while the broader metabolic problem remains ignored. The deeper question is not simply, how much sodium is someone eating? The deeper question is, what metabolic environment is that sodium entering? Another major factor affecting blood pressure is potassium. Potassium helps counterbalance some effects of sodium and supports vascular function. This is why improving diet quality often improves blood pressure regulation more effectively than obsessively restricting salt alone. A practical approach includes more whole foods, leafy greens, fruit, beans, avocados, hydration, exercise, stress reduction, and sleep optimization. Now, another fascinating relationship exists between sodium and stress hormones. Chronic stress activates the sympathetic nervous system continuously. Adrenaline rises, cortisol rises, blood vessels constrict, and blood pressure can increase independently of sodium intake. This is one reason nervous system regulation matters so much for cardiovascular health. Now, let's talk about exercise. Regular exercise improves vascular flexibility, insulin sensitivity, and autonomic regulation. And physically active people often require more sodium than sedentary individuals because sweat loss increases electrolyte demand. This is why broad sodium recommendations sometimes fail to account for individual physiology. Context changes everything. Now, another major issue today is overhydration without electrolytes. Some people drink enormous amounts of plain water while aggressively avoiding sodium. This can create headaches, poor performance, dizziness, and reduced cognitive function. Hydration should support electrolyte balance, not dilute it excessively. If this is helpful so far, consider subscribing. I post content like this every day focused on neuroscience, metabolism, hydration, hormonal health, recovery, and science-based performance tools. One of the most practical ways to use sodium strategically is understanding how timing, lifestyle, and daily habits influence electrolyte needs. Because sodium requirements are not static. They fluctuate constantly depending on stress, activity, climate, sleep, diet, and metabolic state. Your body loses sodium continuously through sweat, urine, respiration, exercise, heat exposure, and even overnight while sleeping. At the same time, hormones like insulin, aldosterone, and cortisol continuously regulate sodium retention and fluid balance. This creates a dynamic system that changes hour by hour. Now, one of the most effective strategies for many people is improving morning hydration. After 7 to 9 hours of sleep, the body naturally becomes mildly dehydrated. You lose water through breathing and perspiration overnight. A much more effective approach than immediately consuming caffeine is starting the day with water plus electrolytes. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine trying to start a car with low battery fluid and poor electrical conductivity. The system may still function, but inefficiently. Morning hydration with adequate sodium helps restore plasma volume and improve nervous system efficiency early in the day. A practical protocol many people benefit from: 16 to 32 ounces of water shortly after waking combined with electrolytes. Especially if fasting, training early, sweating heavily, or consuming caffeine. Many individuals notice improved alertness, energy stability, and mental clarity almost immediately. Now, another major factor affecting sodium needs is environmental heat. Heat dramatically increases sweat losses, and sweat contains sodium. People exercising outdoors, using saunas frequently, or living in hot climates often require significantly more electrolyte replacement. Now let's talk about endurance and exercise performance. One major reason sodium improves physical output is through blood volume support. Blood carries oxygen, nutrients, hormones, and fuel throughout the body. Sodium helps maintain adequate plasma volume for circulation. When sodium and hydration drop too low, heart rate increases, fatigue increases faster, recovery declines, and cognitive sharpness decreases. This is why athletes often experience both physical and mental fatigue simultaneously during dehydration. Now, another fascinating relationship exists between sodium and muscle contractions. Muscles contract through electrical signaling involving sodium, potassium, and calcium gradients. If electrolyte balance becomes compromised, neuromuscular efficiency drops. This often appears as muscle cramps, weakness, poor endurance, reduced power output, or slower recovery. And importantly, many people attempt to solve these issues with more stimulants rather than correcting hydration and mineral balance first. Now let's discuss fasting again. Intermittent fasting and ketogenic diets lower insulin levels. Lower insulin increases sodium excretion by the kidneys. This means many people unintentionally create sodium deficiency while trying to improve metabolic health. Common symptoms include headaches, low blood pressure, fatigue, poor workouts, and brain fog. Often, increasing sodium intake resolves many of these symptoms quickly. A practical fasting protocol includes water plus electrolytes during fasting windows, especially during adaptation phases or active days. Now, another highly effective strategy involves pre-exercise sodium intake. Many athletes benefit from electrolytes 30 to 60 minutes before training because it supports hydration, circulation, endurance, and nervous system performance. Many people notice improved stamina, reduced fatigue, and better mental sharpness during exercise. Recovery matters too. Recovery is active biology. The nervous system, muscles, hormones, and immune system all require proper hydration and mineral balance to function efficiently. Electrolyte depletion slows recovery dramatically. This is why many people feel exhausted for hours after heavy sweating or heat exposure if sodium replacement is inadequate. So when we step back and look at the full picture, one thing becomes very clear. Sodium is not simply a seasoning. It is a foundational component of human physiology. Your brain depends on it. Your muscles depend on it. Your nervous system depends on it. Your hydration status, circulation, endurance, recovery, and cognitive performance all rely heavily on proper electrolyte balance. And once you understand that, you stop viewing salt through simplistic headlines and begin understanding it through physiology. Today, we discussed how sodium helps generate the electrical signals that allow neurons and muscles to function properly. We explored why hydration is not just about water, but about electrolyte balance together. We talked about how low sodium states can contribute to fatigue, brain fog, headaches, poor exercise performance, dizziness, and reduced cognitive function. And we examined how fasting, heat exposure, heavy sweating, endurance exercise, and chronic stress all increase sodium needs in many individuals. Because ultimately, the body operates as an interconnected electrical and biochemical system, not isolated parts. Salt is not automatically good. Salt is not automatically bad. Context matters. Metabolic health matters. Kidney function matters. Activity level matters. Stress matters. Sleep matters. And importantly, electrolyte balance matters. Now, one of the most practical takeaways from this discussion is understanding how many people are unintentionally underperforming because of poor hydration strategy. They drink large amounts of plain water, but ignore electrolytes. They consume caffeine aggressively, but neglect mineral balance. They train intensely, but fail to replace sodium losses. And the body responds predictably. Low energy, poor focus, fatigue, cramping, reduced endurance, and brain fog. Sometimes the issue is not motivation. It's physiology. Now, this does not mean everyone should massively increase sodium intake overnight. The goal is awareness. Awareness of your body, your sweat rate, your activity level, your diet, your climate, and your recovery patterns. Because optimal performance always comes from supporting physiology intelligently, not following extremes blindly. So here's a simple challenge for you. Over the next week, pay attention to your hydration and electrolyte habits intentionally. Notice how you feel when hydration includes proper electrolytes instead of only water. Pay attention to your energy, mental clarity, exercise performance, recovery, and cognitive endurance, because many people are surprised by how dramatically proper hydration affects the nervous system, especially the brain. And remember, the nervous system is electrical. Electrolytes help power that system. If this video added value, like the video and subscribe to join others optimizing their brain, metabolism, hydration, hormones, recovery, and long-term health naturally through science-backed tools and practical physiology. And as always, thank you for watching.